So that's where we currently sit on the testing. Gender free, gender fair, the standards are the same, and that's great, for equality of opportunity, maybe not a quality of outcome. We do see differences, and we are a little bit more progressive with females in the infantry and the more demanding areas that require the physical elements. But how that's going to pan out in the next 5 to 10 years with regards to musculoskeletal injuries, etc., I think will be interesting evidence for the British Army to assess as to whether we made the right call, making the gender-specific elements fair or not. And that's quite a controversial thing for us to approach, but I think that's something definitely that will highlight itself to us in the next 5 to 10 years.
Hey guys, welcome back to another week of Mops and Mo's with Drew and Alex. Just a real quick news bulletin for those of you out there who have not yet seen Rebel Moon on Netflix. Don't watch it because it sucks.
I can't necessarily say don't watch it because it's almost entertaining how much it sucks.
That's fair.
It's bad. It's bad enough that you watch it with somebody where you can talk about how bad it is while you're watching it.
Yeah, and it's a shame because Zack Snyder, he did 300, didn't he?
Yeah.
Maybe I was distracted in 300 by just the glorious physiques and the abs, but
no, I think he's been constrained by other people from going full Zack Snyder, and when he had entire editorial control of a movie, it was just so painfully
bad?
predictable, derivative. It took all the tropes from other sci-fi movies, but none of what made them compelling. So it was just over and over stuff that was copied from other movies.
So Charlie Hunnam,
I don't know.
Big fan, love Charlie. Guy Ritchie movies, he's a stalwart, does a fantastic job. But in this particular film, he decided that he wanted to do his favorite accent, which apparently is a Northern Irish accent.
The accents are incredibly hilarious.
Well, so here's the thing. Here's the thing. The accent, he claims that his Northern Irish accent was so good in the original take that the American audience couldn't understand it. So they had to go back and redo all of his sound with a toned down version of the Northern Irish accent.
What he did in that movie is a toned down version of the accent?
It is horrible. And I say that having gone, when I was in graduate school in Scotland, one of the coaches I worked with was Northern Irish, couldn't understand a word he said. So I get where he's coming from. However, Charlie Hunnam sounds horrible as a intergalactic Belfast. Yeah, like a Belfast astronaut. So a good friend of mine told me that the movie is effectively A Bug's Life. I would argue that that's probably a better film. So if you want to watch a good film, go see A Bug's Life. So anyway, in other news, today's episode, we are speaking with somebody from the UK, and I'll let you do the bio here in a second. But before we go down that road, I wanted to just throw out a few fun facts about the UK. And there's 10 of them. I'm not going to name all 10. We'll just go through a quick 5. Let me see.
Disclaimer for the audience. I don't know what any of these facts are.
He doesn't know any of these. So I'm going to quiz you. How much tea do British people drink in a day? Cumulatively, not one person.
Measured in bags of tea,
measured in cups.
Liters?
How many cups of tea? Which I'm assuming is a teacup, not a measure.
How many people are there?
Just guess. This is going to take forever. Just guess.
I don't know. Several million.
100 million cups.
That's a lot of cups.
Every day. They like tea. True or false? The Queen, well, this says the Queen, God rest her soul. The King. True or false? The King has a passport.
Just based on this being a fun fact, it's got to be unexpected. So I'm going to say false. The King does not have a passport.
You're right. The King does not have a passport. Passports are issued in the name of the King. Therefore, he doesn't have a passport. He also has really chunky fingers, if you guys haven't seen that.
Are you looking at a picture of him holding the passport
T?
He doesn't have? Why are you looking? Oh, it's T. I got it.
Yeah. No, I'm not looking at a picture at all. But anybody who has seen King Charles? Yes. King Charles.
We're deleting this because our guest will be offended by you not knowing the name of the king.
Yeah. Well, he has chunky fingers. King Charles has chunky fingers, not our guest. Here is another one. What is the national dish of England?
Is it a pudding?
I don't know. What is it?
I don't it's maybe a pudding with a weird name. Black Forest, something.
I mean, you could argue this is a weird name. maybe that might be a racist argument. Chicken tikka masala.
Really?
Yeah, dude, the curry scene in the UK is like fire. It is,
That's their national dish?
yeah.
That's
Wait
a
for this one. So this is, I know this because I went to school there, but you are not going to guess this. The national animal of Scotland.
national animal of Scotland.
You will never, no, I use this all the time. No one ever knows the answer.
I mean, what's coming to mind is sheep.
You're so wrong. It's New Zealand.
That's New
Scotland.
Zealand's national animal?
I think there's more sheep in New Zealand than people,
Okay.
but I
I'll
don't
buy
know.
it.
So national animal of Scotland. One more guess.
Is it a bird of some kind? I don't know.
It's a unicorn.
What?
Yeah, it's a unicorn. Seriously, that is a true. You can Google that as a real thing. National animal of Scotland is unicorn.
Is this true in the Snapple fact sense of being true, or is this actually true?
No, this is like side of a U-Haul trailer fact. The national animal.
That's not that much higher a bar.
No, that. Those are real. Those are real things. But no, it's. I remember looking this up. It has something to do with like mythology and fairies and something. To
Okay.
be clear, Scotland acknowledges that the unicorn is not a real thing.
Yeah.
It also happens to be their national animal.
I was thinking about this recently, though. What seems more likely to be a real thing? A giraffe, which is like a giant horse with a super long neck and like crazy horns and stuff like that, or a unicorn, which is just a horse with a horn. Like it seems like giraffes are way less likely than unicorns, but they're real and unicorns
I was going
aren't.
to say I would counter that by saying giraffes are in fact real.
Yeah,
And
that's what I'm saying now.
unicorns.
It's absurd.
But the giraffe, from an evolutionary standpoint, has a long neck so that it can reach its food. A horse has no evolutionary reason to have
Just a
produced
defense mechanism, an offense mechanism, that'd be pretty useful.
Have you seen a horse rear up on its hind legs? I think it's doing just fine. It just kicks the shit out of you.
But if two horses are fighting and one has a unicorn horn, who's going to win? That's an evolutionary advantage.
I don't know. I don't know if a horse. I don't know if you could headbutt a horse that's reared up and kicking you in the face.
I bet you could.
Needless to
Anyway.
say, I don't know if that was four. Here's just a couple of more. Here's a couple more. Stamps originated in the UK. Not really a surprise there, I don't think. Cheese rolling is a sport. There's actually a Netflix show on this, and it's insane. They chase a block of cheese down a hill.
Isn't it? It's not a block of cheese. It's a wheel
It's
of
a
cheese.
wheel.
That's why it rolls. Yeah.
And then this one, which actually I don't like this because I am one of the few people I think that actually likes haggis, but haggis imports to the US have been banned since the 70s. You can't actually buy haggis in the US because something to do with the fact that it's stuffed in a sheep's stomach and that's like illegal. But if you've not had haggis, actually, here's a transition. Today's guest has undoubtedly eaten haggis before. Who are we talking to today?
Well, just as a brief preamble, this episode's been a long time coming. I know some followers of the page and the podcast have mentioned this to us. We've been hoping to dive into how the British Army approaches fitness for a long time, including the fact that there are opportunities to make it a full-time job while you're in uniform, as well as some recent updates to their testing. So we finally got a qualified, fantastic guest with a accent that is on brand and not exaggerated like you would find in Rebel Moon.
We didn't redub his audio.
No, it came out perfect the first try. So with that said, Warrant Officer Second Class Steve Turner, he joined the British Army at 16 years old, joining the Royal Signals. At the age of 19, he qualified as an all-arms physical training instructor, which is their additional duty type of PT role. So he's still full-time in his original job, but also has the job of delivering physical training, which he did for soldiers deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan at the height of the conflict, doing that from 2005 onwards. Alongside his PT delivery, Steve was a member of the Army boxing team for 7 years and got the opportunity to represent England on 2 occasions, winning both times. Deciding to cut his boxing career short, he pursued a career in the Royal Army Physical Training Corps. So now he's moving to the full-time physical training job and completed that selection process in 2011. Since successfully completing the 9-month RAPTC instructor's course in 2012, he has spent the last decade assigned to multiple infantry and training establishment units, such as the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, And during that time, he has also delivered multiple physical training courses as an instructor at the Army School of Physical Training. With a thirst for constant development, Steve has also completed a bachelor's in strength and conditioning and a master's in applied sports psychology. And I won't dive down this rabbit hole quite yet because we do it sufficiently in the episode, but I will note that there are a few terms that the British Army and the American Army share but use differently. For example, you might make certain assumptions that his rank is Warrant Officer 2, but Warrant Officer means a very different thing in the British Army. So we'll discuss some of that up front just to make sure it's all clear.
I'll also point out, and please include the video in the show notes of the training montage, but
oh yeah, good call.
Arguably the British physical training scene has some of the most badass tank tops I've certainly ever seen. And there are links you guys can use. You can Google these.
He says tank tops. He means uniform tank tops that you wear on duty as your outer garment.
So yeah, we'll have that link in there too. You guys can go and buy them if you want. I think that'd be kind of fun. Maybe we should make a Mops and Mows. Slide into Alex's DMs if you guys want us to create a Mops and Mows stringer tank workout t-shirt thing.
Hold on. Chill out on encouraging people to slide to the DMs for products. I haven't even been able to keep up with selling stickers. I can't get into the apparel business until we figure out some workflow stuff.
You guys are interested in stickers? Slide into the DMs.
I am, again, not ready for that. I don't have the time.
If you have any clue how to sell apparel, slide into the DMs. Maybe we'll bring you on board. But no, this was definitely a really fun episode. Again, having been around the British military a little bit when I was in school over there, it's fun to sort of go down some of these memory lanes with him and talk about the way that they have things set up. I would also argue, and we were actually saying this in the notes and the side as we were having these conversations, like despite a couple of shortfalls that he mentions, like the British military has the whole PT MOS thing figured out. Like they're doing some really cool stuff. And it's interesting as we sit here with H2F and some other programs that the conventional US militaries are standing up and they're sort of like scratching their heads wondering like, oh my God, like how do we do this thing? It's like, well, these guys have got it pretty damn well figured out. Maybe we should talk to them. So hopefully this conversation inspires some of those conversations. And certainly if you've made it this far in the introduction, you'll be on the edge of your seat waiting to hear more.
Before we launch into the episode, I do want to say if you are out there in the UK, during this discussion, we discovered an exercise they have called Shins to Beam, which is astonishingly similar to a leg tuck. So if you want to be a founding member of Shins to Beam Nation, we can do some co-branding work, so reach out.
Shins to Beam. It sounds, in true British fashion, it sounds so much more sophisticated. Enjoy. Hey guys, before we kick this episode off, just wanted to give a quick plug to the two options that we have for folks interested in training with us. We have the team-based Long and Strong program. And then if you are interested in a more engaging, intensive, more tailored option, we offer one-on-one coaching as well.
And you can find both of those on the training tab of our website, mopsandmows.com. And if it's the team training you're interested, click that link and you will find a 1-week free trial.
So again, if any of the things that we talk about on this podcast are interesting to you as far as training goes, head to the website like Alex just mentioned, select that training tab and follow the instructions from there. Enjoy the episode.
So it was quite funny listening to the Army Sergeant Major discussing changes implemented around nutrition and certain things about, is it the tucks you call it, as one of the fitness test standards, like the knees to chest.
Oh, the leg tuck, yeah.
The leg tuck.
God, don't get Alex started on the leg tuck.
Yeah, it was quite, you one of you certainly got more passionate than the other about that, if not both as passionate about the changes.
That's Alex's mission.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here. I've watched some content from your instructor certification course and things like that. It seems like the UK Army has an exercise. I don't know what you call it, but you hang from a beam.
Yeah,
and do like a
Shins
pull
to
up.
beam.
Yeah, there you go.
Shin to beam. It's called the colonial leg tuck, Alex.
So we have one called Shins to Beam where you, I'm sure we'll talk about this as we go through. You hang on an old school heave bar, so not like the Beaver Fit frames we see now, which are the round bars, an old school wooden beam. You will do 3 pull-ups, full extension, and it's almost like a dance routine. And you have to pause at the bottom, pause at the top, chin above the bar. Then you will slap the side of your body to pivot to then overgrasp. Then you'll do 3 overgrasp, and then you'll go shins to beam. You'll turn your head back, shins to beam 3 times, and then you'll come back over the bar. So it's quite a really controlled exercise, but something that means nothing. Nobody else really does it. It's just very much a traditional thing that we do as part of the Royal Army Physical Training course. So I don't know if they still do it now.
That's heaven forbid someone can't do one. You have to get rid of it.
Yeah, if you've got a video of that anywhere that you can send me, I would love to make sure. I'll make some content about shins to beam so that Americans can go validate it.
I'll have a scan. If not, I'll try and execute it for you and send it across.
Oh, jeez.
Perfect.
Speaking of video content, I want to get this out there at the very top. Is there a way for Alex and I to get a hold of one of these white tank tops with the red, like with the the thing? Oh my God, that is the coolest PT outfit I've ever seen. I have to buy one. Is there a store we can go to?
For listeners at home, he has stepped away from the camera. He is grabbing his tank top. Yeah. There it is. Beautiful.
Oh my God. How do we get one of those without being British?
I'll send you across an email website.
Perfect. Yes. There we go.
I'm so excited. If we ever get around to making our own merchandise, we're doing a knockoff of that with the Mob Samos logo right there in the middle. So thank you. But here, let's kick off with this, because I know maybe a fair chunk of the beginning of this is just going to be like explaining terms. I mean, the U.S. military is full of its own acronyms, but can you explain your quartermaster? I'm going to say it wrong, so I'm just going to let you do it. And then just kind of, what does that mean in terms of like the broader military?
I'll take a hack at this, and I'll see. You can tell me if I got this right or explain what I got wrong, because I was confused about this initially.
Yeah.
So there's a few things to clarify for our mostly American, mostly Army audience here. First off, your rank is Warrant Officer Second Class.
Yeah, Class 2. Warrant Officer Class 2. Yeah.
Warrant Officer Class 2. So that's in the American Army, Warrant Officer means like technical expert. You're neither an NCO nor an officer. You're in like a separate category of technical experts, and it goes from Warrant Officer 1 up to 5.
Okay.
For you guys, it's very different. Warrant officers are the senior NCOs, and there's only 2 warrant officer ranks, Class 1 and Class 2. Class 1 is higher ranking than Class 2.
Yeah.
And warrant officers, loosely speaking, are the equivalent of sergeants major in our Army, except that in your Army, Sergeant Major is a position or an appointment as opposed to a rank.
Jesus.
So yeah, it's a rank. So we have, when you mentioned about the senior NCO pathway, so we have the junior NCOs, which will be Lance Corporal to Corporal, and then our senior NCO starts at Sergeant, then Staff Sergeant, and then our warrant officers are Class 2, which is where I sit in the space of, and then Class 1, which is the senior rank as a soldier you can achieve in the British Army. So and very much a warrant officer can be very either technical, so we either sit in the space of like my position in PT. You have a position in infrastructure. That's another warrant officer role that's very demanding in a unit. And then you have your sergeant majors, the traditional sergeant major you and I know of in both force, that will manage we call it a squadron or a battery, depending on where you're located in what units, and obviously their own isms. So if you're in the infantry, it will be a company that you manage. If you're in the Royal Signals or the Engineers, it will be a squadron. If you're in the artillery, it's a battery. So they have their own isms, but certainly my position is more of a technical. So I don't sit in the space as a sergeant major to be this time, this place, although I certainly do have those involvements. It's very much, I'm an assurance umbrella, experienced and very much providing or ensuring that units are conducting training safely. So that's kind of where the space I sit in within the RAPTC, which is the Royal Army Physical Training Corps.
So my next question is, when I was initially introduced to you, I was introduced to you as QMSI Turner. And if I'm not mistaken, that's your position rather than rank, and that's Quartermaster Sergeant Instructor. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so Quartermaster Sergeant Instructor is a really old term utilised for us as a corps within the PT domain. And that involvement is me as, the quartermaster element is me managing the facility. And then the sergeant instructor aspect is kind of the PT element, which is where the QMSI space sits in. So, as a general understanding, if I'm a staff sergeant, which would have been the rank below me, you sit in a position where you manage your one unit, and that unit can be anything, can be infantry, signals, engineers, artillery, intelligence, etc. And you manage that domain of about 300 people, as but an example. In my space, I sit in a training regiment with the Royal Artillery currently, and I manage a garrison facility that accommodates about 3,000 to 5,000 people. So anything that's got to do with safety, training delivery, infrastructure, PT delivery, kind of sits in my space. So naturally, anything that goes wrong within the garrison of 6 units I sit in, everyone comes to me first, not the staff sergeants who are in charge of their own 6 units. I'm the one that gets it in the neck first, which is good fun.
Well, and it seems like you still find plenty of time to play really good golf too, based on your award.
It's part of the gift of joining the physical training corps.
God, see, I'm okay. I'm very jealous of that. But so I know part of where we want to steer this conversation, at least at the outset, is just some familiarization. And H2F in the U.S. military has obviously become a huge thing. It's part of the reason we started this conversation. But kind of around the dialogue, maybe at a senior leadership level, when they were envisioning the role that conventional soldiers would play in the H2F space. Historically it was like the MTF, or the MFT, not the MTF, the MFT, the Master Fitness Trainer. But I know in the British military, you guys have had PTIs, I think is the right acronym, right? Physical Training Instructor. You guys have had that as an MOS or whatever you want to call it for a really long time. Can you walk us through kind of an overview of what that is for you guys, that PTI role?
Yeah, so I mean, I can date this back as far as you need to, and
go way back.
From a core perspective, we formed initially in 1860, where we had 12 individuals that were selected to go to Oxford University and conduct a physical training course, and they're known as the 12 Apostles for us as within the RAPTC. And this was all divergent from the Crimean War, and finding that during these aspects, physical training was a real weakness for the British Army at that stage, and something needed to be developed. So that's how we initially started, and we emerged as a gymnastics staff, and then during the First and Second World Wars, we then became the Army Physical Training Corps over time, sort of in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And we kind of had that embedded into the British Army history, and knowing that depending on where deployments we were going to at those times, we needed to ensure that soldiers were fit to fight. And that's kind of some of the branding now: fit to fight, fight to fit, ready to deploy at whatever moment's notice. And so physical training instructors were embedded into the Army, kind of from as early as since then, really. And, us from a physical training corps perspective, were placed in certain garrisons and locations, way back when in the 19th and early 20th centuries, to then train soldiers, junior NCOs as physical training instructors, and go off and do their thing. And that's, been maintained up to modern day. Our structure is very much aligned with somebody's interested in physical training. They've got a real passion for it. Obviously, hope there's a little bit of self-determination theory and motivation within that, and that they want to be PTs, PTIs within the Ministry of Defence and British Army more specifically, because they want to help people, they want to develop them, etc. So they'll come to us, as you mentioned earlier, at the Army School of Physical Training in Aldershot, which is sort of our birthplace, and has been for generations. PTIs will come through there, about 100 to 120 per course, and there's about 4 courses run a year, and they'll conduct a 9-week course, and they're delivered by the Royal Army Physical Training Corps instructors. And that can be somebody that's come in just a bit of a gym bunny, but wants to help people develop their own knowledge. And in 9 weeks' time, they'll leave with that coveted cross swords, the white vest and red piping that you see.
The one we're going to buy online.
Yeah. And off they go into the field army, and they will work under somebody, such as myself, a sergeant or a staff sergeant in a unit, and deliver physical training to that establishment, and develop themselves further if they want to, but it's not their primary role. There are allocations and job roles within the British Army that allow PTIs to go somewhere and just be a PTI for 2 years, 3 years perhaps. 3 years is a little long. And those are mainly at the phase 1 basic training establishments and phase 2 establishments where people go through their trade training. But in the main, they complete the 9-week course, they go back out to the field army, to their respective units, and they could be involved with, their initial job, which might be an infantry, might be a REME mechanic, a mechanic in the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers, might be a comms specialist in the Royal Signal. So they do that primarily, but they also have this qualification as being a PTI to deliver PT in a safe manner, when the times are needed and requested upon.
Mm-hmm. So we're gonna get to the next phase of this in a second, because as you stated, that 9-week course gets you to the point where you are kind of a secondary duty physical training leader under somebody who's actually in the RAPTC. So first off, just to make sure you're clear on where we're coming from, the U.S. Army, the total of what we offer in this space is a 2-week course that makes you ready to do it as a secondary responsibility, as an additional duty. And then that's the end of the line right now. There's aspirations to model something kind of on what you guys have, to like maybe get towards a full-time MOS or something like that, but that is not there yet. Nothing like that is in place. So I want to ask you about the next step, right? Because, and if I'm not mistaken, the next thing you do after that is apply to actually join the Royal Army Physical Training Corps. I'd love to hear a little bit about the selection process at that point. Like, what do you have to have demonstrated before you can join? How selective is it? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, of course. So, it's very much on the individual. So you can imagine we have about 400 to 500 people every year that pass out as a physical training instructor after the 9-week course and go to the field army and do their thing. Now, a very select few of them want to come back and do, my job and the career stream that you go through in the RAPTC. And they run about, again, 3, 4, maybe 5 selections a year, depending on, the capacity for people wanting to do the course. And they'll run a selection process. Now, normally when this selection process is conducted, a minimum of 12 to 24 months of being a PTI is expected before you go. And there are some prerequisites you have to achieve before you also go. And that can be ranging from adventurous training qualifications. So you have to, be compliant in basic qualifications in rock climbing, canoeing, kayaking, mountain biking. There's a few in there that you must be competent in and have the prerequisite qualifications. So, to even get to the start point of selection, we're looking for a developed, well-rounded junior NCO. It has to be a minimum of a lance corporal, and corporal as well. We do have some sergeants that go for the course, and they will apply to join the RAPTC, and that is a 1-week selection course. And normally you might get a number applying for the course between sort of 20, 25 to 30 that will apply for this 1-week course. And at the end of that course, they might select in between the region of, could be as low as 5, could be as high as 10. And so your chances are reasonable, but still not an absolute given, provided that all 30 people on that course are really well prepared, extremely fit, extremely motivated, hungry to succeed. And sometimes you really do see, having been at the PT school and part of these selection processes, big fish, little pond syndrome, people coming in and feeling like, oh my God, I'm near the bottom third of this pack. Yet at my unit, I am number one, and that's the reason I'm here on this selection process. And that goes for any case in point, right? And the US military is no exception for various courses. Like the Navy SEALs could be one example for you guys, and SAS selection for us is another. So these are elite people in their fields that have a real quest for wanting to develop themselves, and unfortunately might not make the cut. So at the end of that week, let's say they select 10 from that 30, and they'll then be given a date to say, look, from anywhere to 3 months to 9 or 12 months time, you're going to come back here and you will conduct a 9-month course, and that will train you to go into the field army on your own as a Royal Army Physical Training Corps instructor. So immediately you mentioned about the PT element from just being a physical training instructor with you guys for 2 weeks. We do that for 9. I know the US doesn't have a physical training core or branch equivalent. So we then develop them people for another 9 months to promote them. They will become senior NCOs, so they will leave as sergeants and go into the field army at certain locations. And mainly what the PT Corps would do is you'd finish your 9-month course and they'll send you to a phase 1 establishment where there are other RAPTCIs. So you've got somebody there to mentor you and develop you. Because the last thing we want to do is send someone who's just done a 9-month course out into a unit on their own, make loads of mistakes potentially, and cause serious harm to people in that unit, and obviously us as a corporate image organization. So that 9-month course consists of multiple aspects, and it develops them from a junior NCO to a senior NCO. And you really do see the change in the individuals. Having been an instructor there as a staff sergeant at the Army School of Physical Training, that was one of my jobs there for 2 years. And it was great to see that real change in development, giving them autonomy to be able to prove to us that they are exactly what they've been seen during the selection week, and they are ready to go out and deploy, and join the RAPTC, the coveted Cross Swords and Crown. And we are one of the few selection processes in the Army, and you have the special forces, of course you do, which are kind of on another level. But the RAPTC is a selection process, and a real tough one that, physical training instructors really want to achieve, that have a desire to join the RAPTC. So, I'll go into the 9-month course, and in essence, multiple sporting qualifications are delivered. So, becoming a boxing official is one. That's one we've traditionally maintained. Being a judge and timekeeper is a massive one, and there's a massive passion for boxing myself and a background in the sport. It's great to see that still maintained. Athletics coaching, swimming coaching. We used to do judo. There was a little bit of fencing sort of in our history. So, being qualified in fencing was another traditional thing. Gymnastics was huge for us as well, but not so much now. We still do a type of gym agility. And I don't know if you guys have seen, it's called the high horse display. We do it for our pass-off parades. You'll find it on YouTube, and it's sort of a 3-way horse box.
I saw that in the hype video, and I was too busy just like admiring the PT uniforms, but like the parkour, the level of parkour was like, this is pretty legit.
Yeah. It's
we've got a break
no
here. I'm gonna bump in just to explain to the audience that when he says athletics, for our American audience, he means track and field.
Yeah. Meters, kilometers, athletics, gymnastics, is all,
Yeah. So those qualifications are thrown into there, and the adventurous training ones I mentioned earlier, kayaking, canoeing, mountain biking, rock climbing, etc. They are further developed. So they go in with a foundation level to attempt the selection, and then through the 9-month course, they then take on leadership qualifications in them. So they're competent at going out to their units after the 9 months and delivering a bit of mountain biking to people as a bit of detox potentially from operations, or to put people in stress via different means that are outside of the work environment. And adventurous training in the British Army is a massive positive when it comes to building team cohesion, testing limits for people. Someone that might have a fear of heights, taking them rock climbing and seeing them under potential stresses they never experienced before are also real positives. So they develop that in adventure training also, and obviously get taught a hell of a lot of content specific to physical training plans, auditing, and making sure that we're compliant and conformant with policy and law. Military law when it comes to risk assessments, lesson plans, etc., and those type of aspects. So the course is enduring, but at the end of that 9-month period, it's a massive tick in the box, and it feels great to see the guys and girls badge in, and obviously for those involved in it to pass off as well.
I do want to ask a couple fast clarification questions. One, how many RAPTCIs and PTIs would you expect for how many soldiers? Like, what's the ratio there in a normal Army unit? And then after that, if you could just kind of give people some context on adventurous training, how much of that is there for the average soldier in the Army?
Yeah. So traditionally, I mean, we have a policy, and I'm linking this back into a little bit of some of the points in your previous discussions and podcasts. So they mentioned about an auditing process, and I can't remember who the podcast you did it with, and that there was no auditing process for the American Army. Well, we have a really stringent one here in the British Army.
Good for you.
One of the and doctoring was another one around trying to find stuff to relate it to. So traditionally 1 to 15 is a great to have. How for PTI, 2 members delivering for PT.
That'd be amazing.
That is not hit by us in the main, and every RAPTC that would listen to this would go, absolutely no chance. And we'd all probably agree. Like, for example, at my establishment, we work to 1 to 60, which isn't great, but unfortunately, that's the constraint we work under. Yeah, and the commanding officer takes on that risk, understands it, and we try and develop it. So, in a unit, traditionally, you might have 7 PTIs to 300, but you will only have 1 RAPTCI. That's it. So, when you badge into the PT Corps, you are very much one of one. Wherever I go into a unit, I am that one person that very much represents and has to ensure that my PTIs are delivering things safely, correctly, etc., and to a good standard. So yeah, that's that on the very much on the assurance front for PT deliverers. Adventurous training throughout the British Army. We really try and push it as much as possible. But like most organisations, there have been some cutbacks announced for us in the British Army very recently in the last 6 months, and that has come to fruition and impacted in such a way that the abilities and opportunities to get away are becoming a little bit more limited. However, we can utilise something in our units called the 48-hour rule. They call it unit authorised adventurous training. And that means we can, on a Thursday afternoon, go right to the commanding officer. We are going to go out tomorrow on Friday afternoon. We're going to do some hill walking, or wherever you might be, depending on your location, mountain biking, bit of rock climbing. And we're going to source it through units funds. We're going to source it through vehicles that we can book, mountain bikes we may have, canoes, kayaks, whatever it might be. And we're going to go out and do some AT this weekend. And I've got 10 people that I can offer this out to with my instructor tick in the box, and my ratios that I can deliver to is but an example, and off you go. So those type of things really do get pushed across. Adventurous training centres we have across the UK are also extremely busy. Multiple units sending soldiers, officers, etc., to get qualified or just to go out there for the exposure and give the opportunity. It's part of the deal potentially of joining the British Army. And it's certainly sport as well was something 20 years ago, when I first enlisted, that you've got sport every Wednesday. That there was no quarrels about that. It just happened, and it doesn't really happen anymore. But we're definitely part of the culture of keeping it alive. And if it wasn't very much for the RAPTCs and units, unless you had somebody with a keen interest in AT, a senior officer that really enjoyed it, it wouldn't get pushed as hard, let's put it that way. But it's still certainly a culture of our service, that's for sure.
I just want to and Alex, maybe this is a question for you as prior service, because from where I have sat now for a number of years, most of that stuff, the adventurous type stuff, I'm thinking like rock climbing and going out and doing things. It's kind of caged under the morale flag as opposed to the let's develop just sort of the spirit of adventurous training. And then to take it a step further, most, if not all of that is like just outsourced to like the civilian space. And so all of a sudden the funding becomes an issue, the planning, the timing. It sounds like on the British side, that's very much an internal thing. And you guys kind of handle that internally, which I think is, I don't know if there's a question there. It's just like, man, could you imagine if the American military just turned everybody loose to go hill walking for the weekend? First, people would bitch and moan because it's the weekend. And then secondly, somebody would screw with the funding and they would just have it all pulled. But I do want to ask, and maybe this is specific to the 9-month course, maybe the whole process in general, but one of the things that we've hit on a number of times in this podcast is just sort of maybe the conversation around lowering of standards because of cultural pressures or what have you. I mean, with the recent Army combat fitness test, you could go all the way up to the congressional level and how those guys can influence things and change movements and standards because it's not going to be conducive to this population or that population. With as much history as you guys have baked into this whole process, has that come into play? Are you guys fighting that, or is it just sort of expected that, hey, here's the standard and you've just got to meet it?
I think we've recently changed or adopted a new process for our military testing, our fitness testing. And we used to have the PFA, which used to be the personal fitness assessment. And it was more of it wasn't a diagnostic tool. It's very much a pass or fail, even though it's considered an assessment. And it used to be 2 minutes of press ups, best effort, 2 minutes of sit ups, best effort, and a 1.5 mile run. And there were certain, obviously, standards to hit. And the AFT, the annual fitness test, was an 8-mile loaded march with, the weights would vary. The infantry might carry 30 kilos. The Royal Signals might carry 15 kilos, as but examples. And it would have to be done in 2 hours. So they were the old fitness testing that, didn't really focus in on the components of fitness. And this was readdressed probably in the early to mid sort of 10s, 2010, 2015 type stage. And we utilized, with the RAPTC at the time, utilized the university to test and conduct what might be relevant for now, here and now. And, operations in Iraq and Afghanistan certainly dictated that. Why did we need to run a 1.5 miles in 10:30 if you were under 30 years old as a male? But as a female, you had to run it at 13 minutes. Yet you're both in Afghan. I've got a female medic working with an infantry soldier. The standards don't apply. You have to be as quick as the male. Mm-hmm. You have to carry the same weight as the male potentially. And there were real grey areas there. And we've now aligned our process with the SCR, the Soldier Conditioning Review, which is now more or less a diagnostic tool, utilizing components of fitness to test explosive strength, power, speed, agility, balance. And if you're deficient in some areas, depending on the testing, and I'm sure we can talk about that more in depth shortly, it gives you something to go away with. And that's great. But how specific is it to what we do? And that's an argument that, RAPTCIs continually have. Now, with the RFT, that is our new test that, as good as, designates you fit for purpose, fit for job role specifically. So the RFTS, the Role Fitness Test Soldier, comprises of multiple elements, from a loaded march carrying particular weight to a 2 kilometer best effort carrying a particular weight, and a few representative military tasks. So I think I heard on one of your previous podcasts, a casualty extraction, something as but one example. So we have that as one. A turret pull, someone dragging someone out of a turret over the top of a tank, but as one example. Leopard crawl, sprints, that type of thing, carrying jerry cans. So there's loads of representative military tasks. Now, that standard is now equaled across both genders, and regardless of what cap badge you are in, if you are in that particular cap badge, you all have to meet that standard. Now, the infantry standard, the parachute regiment standard is higher than, the logistic corps or the intelligence corps, for one, contrasting examples. So you might carry 30 kilo if you're in the infantry for the 4 kilometers, and then for the 2 kilometer best effort, you might be carrying 25 kilo. If you're in the intelligence corps, you might do that 4K carrying 20 kilo, and then the 2K best effort wearing 10 or 15 kilo. So, do I need my intelligence corps or logistics corps individual to be able to run as fast as an infantryman or woman? No, I don't. So the test kind of equates to that, and that's been the justification via, the research and progress done with the university, in the last decade. Mm-hmm. So that's where we currently sit on the testing. Gender free, gender fair. The standards are the same, and that's great. For equality of opportunity, maybe not equality of outcome. We do see differences, and we are a little bit more progressive with females in the infantry and the more demanding areas that require the physical elements. But how that's going to pan out in the next 5 to 10 years with regards to musculoskeletal injuries, etc., I think will be interesting evidence for the British Army to assess as to whether we made the right call, making the gender specific elements fair or not. And that's quite a controversial thing for us to approach, but I think that's something definitely that will highlight itself to us in the next 5 to 10 years.
I like your test better, Alex. I think we're a British military podcast now. I don't think we're going to be a U.S. military podcast anymore. So
that's fair. It's
happy to be here. Anyway, back to you, Alex.
I'm gonna pull on the testing thread a little bit, and I've got a document in front of me that I will put in the show notes for listeners. It's from your Ministry of Defense website, and I want to make sure I've got this kind of straight in my head, because you got a few different assessments here. So you've got role fitness test entry, which is what you take before you join the military to make sure you've achieved a level of fitness.
Did you just say the word royal?
Roll. No, why? Just roll.
Roll. Okay. Just want to make sure. Your accent gets weird sometimes.
Sorry. And then So that test is pretty straightforward. Looks relatively similar to our OPAT. Seated ball throw, isometric mid-thigh pull, and a 2-kilometer run. And then at the end of basic training, you take essentially that test again. Plus, if you're infantry or paratrooper or something like that, you also have a loaded march assessment at the end of basic training as well. Then you move on to what you mentioned, the soldier conditioning review. And it's interesting how you guys have handled this one. You basically got 2 separate tests, one that is like traditional gym based type of movements, and one that is much more obviously combat simulation type of stuff. And you didn't try to mix those together. You kept them as 2 separate events. So the soldier conditioning review being the gym based one, broad jump, seated med ball throw, hex bar deadlift, shuttle sprints, pull-ups, 2-kilometer run, looks an awful lot like our new Army combat fitness test in a lot of ways. And then the one that I think kind of plays more of the combat fitness test role for you guys is the one you were mentioning, the role fitness test soldier. And that's loaded march, what's called fire and movement. So that's bounds and low crawl, casualty drag. And I want to put this out there for our audience. Sled pulls have been a topic of lots of discussion. We did a heavy sled pull in our Master Fitness Trainer course. There's not a very heavy sled pull on the new ACFT. Their sled pull standard is a 110 kilogram bag pulled 20 meters in 35 seconds.
That's roughly 250 in freedom units.
Yeah, roughly 250 pounds. He might have an issue with the freedom units line there. We'll see.
I had to sneak that in once.
You got to.
Roughly double it and a little bit more. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Jerry can carry vehicle Kazovac, which I think is pretty cool. You stand on boxes and you pull a rope attached to weights below you. So you have to lift up 70 kilograms, 150,
roughly 155 in freedom units.
Yeah. And then you hold it for 3 seconds. That's the vehicle Kazovac simulation. And then a repeated lift and carry where you're picking up 45-pound sandbags 20 times and moving all of them 30 meters.
Are these pass? These are pass fail?
Pass fail only. Yeah.
Do you have like senior leaders hunched over PowerPoints critiquing you for red, yellow, green based on performance for these tests? Just out of curiosity.
So in essence, where I work in a phase 2 establishment, which is trade training. So when you mention about the basic, the RFT, BT, and you mentioned about the mid-thigh pull and the 2K effort and the med ball throw, I then have to go from those conducting that, going on leave, having a bit of a break, preparing for the pass-off parade. I'm probably talking about a 6-week delta before they then come to me and have to achieve the standard for the RFT soldier to pass and go into the field army in about 6 to 8 weeks. And it's a massive delta that we're having to deal with to try and get people to that standard. It's getting better, and COVID was a massive issue for us with this. I was getting people initially in my previous job with the Royal Signals doing the same role as a QMSI, and I would have a 48 kilo female who has not carried any weight of significance, and in 12 weeks time I need to get her passing the standard you're talking about there, carrying a 230 pound dead weight bag backwards over a certain distance over a certain time after doing the 4K with X amount of weight on that she hasn't had exposure to in basic training because of the limitations with COVID. So we're kind of getting there on that. If you don't meet the standard, where I'm at now in phase 2, the phase 2 establishment, if you don't meet the standard, you don't go to the field army. You sit with us until you pass. And if you don't pass, the commanding officer has every right to service your discharge and go, you're not fit for service. So accountability for us from an RAPTC perspective, we feel really well supported in that if the standard isn't met, of course, the British Army invests a lot of money in the individuals through basic training and trade training. So we want to employ them. We want people in the service. We want people to add their value. And I've no doubt they have loads of potential and value to add because it's not all about physical fitness. But as a passionate advocate for physical fitness, it's also crucial that you're able to do or meet that employment standard. So are commanders getting rid of people? I think there are. I wouldn't be able to put my hand on my heart for sure and say that, but I have no doubt that particularly in more teeth arm and punchier units, if the standard isn't being met, people are held to account. And we have a formal warning process in the British Army. So if you don't meet it, you get put on a 3-month warning order. And if you don't achieve it in 3 months, it gets reevaluated, and then, decision can be made. Not fit for service, and out you go. But certainly within my domain, within a phase 2 establishment, taking them after basic training, teaching them all their trade relevant stuff before sending them to the field army. If they don't meet it, the commander is very much, they stay until they pass, because they need to pass, which I think is a real positive for us.
Mm-hmm.
So this sounds a lot like some stuff we went through a couple years ago, and there's a good chance you don't have an answer to this question, but I got to ask it just to get an idea of where you guys are at. When data started leaking out about failure rates on our new test, that's when leadership, not necessarily uniformed leadership, but like congressional level leadership, I think, started getting a little bit of cold feet about enforcing this new standard. And there wasn't really the ramp up time given necessary for like a culture to adjust to new expectations. They just kind of dialed back what was required. So do you have any idea about what the failure rates look like, and or is anybody out there worried about the failure rate, basically?
We experience failure rates like everybody does. There are a minority that don't make it. We simply provide that evidence, and give our consult to commanders and explain why it might not be being met, and the reasons and constraints for that. Now it's then up to the commander, and I certainly have experienced this in my past, not where I am now, but in a previous unit where my commander at the time would accept training deficiencies and say, look, this individual might not meet the standard here because of, and here's a rough example. I've got a 17-year-old female who weighs X amount, really struggles with the weight, but when she develops as an adult, and grows a little bit stronger and becomes a little bit more sustained with the testing, I'm sure she'll be fine. And we don't want to injure these people when they've had so much money plowed into them. Now, of course, you can question, the levels of command there, and debate whether that's the right thing to do morally or not. But again, it comes down to that aspect of, in particular, niche trades. And, I won't talk about the teeth arms as much, because I'm sure the teeth arms, the infantry, the parachute regiment, etc., are a lot more stern with this than perhaps some of the corps might be. We have the technical trades, in logistics, intelligence, etc. Do I need my intelligence soldier who sits deep behind enemy lines to, give some type of comparison on operations, to be out carrying this type of weight when they are a technical whiz kid that are unable to do X, Y, and Z, and would be an asset if we lost them because they're not physically capable of meeting their standard. Now, we could debate about that for hours, but there certainly are elements, and I've been at one particular unit, and I won't mention who they are because it would be really unfair, that were very much, particularly within the UK and overseas, one of the most pinnacle of trade groups. And when it came to some of them not meeting the physical employment standard as it was then, before the RFT came in, the commander was not interested whatsoever in getting rid of people, and discharging them from service. And I got it. It was really hard for me to swallow, because it was my passion and job. And I wanted to hold people to account, because suddenly, we've lost our integrity slightly here. And that's probably one of the key parts of our values and standards, I would say, is integrity. As soon as you lose that trust and people don't have the faith in you to stick to your convictions, you can very quickly lose your people. And I certainly felt that impact in this particular unit. But at the same time, watching how they were operational readiness every day, in something a little bit more bespoke than just military stuff, and I had to just turn to the right and, okay, cool, not a problem. So got it, but I had to take it with a pinch of salt, and there was nothing I could really do about that. So yeah, it's a real catch-22. It really is, especially when these technical trades come in, and we've invested so much money in people. What's right and wrong, and that's left to the commanders to make on our consult and guidance, of course. But it sits well above my space.
Yeah, I think there's a piece of that conversation that's missing sometimes that I think about a lot, because I think there are people who interpret like raising the standards as an affront to soldiers, like asking more of them, demanding more of them, and then lowering standards as a favor to soldiers, which I don't think that's, frankly, in my opinion, and I know I'm biased on this one, I don't think that's an accurate interpretation of what's going on, because if we lower standards and allow less than we know what's necessary to keep people safe in the situations we're going to put them in inevitably, whether that's doing their job or combat, I think a lowering of standards is actually a disservice to the soldier, because you're putting them in a situation down the line that you failed to prepare them for when you were able to enforce standards in a safer environment. But
yeah, I agree. And I think
it's
a generational cultural change, isn't it? And things naturally dynamically change over decades. I have no doubt if you were a part of the parachute regiment or the infantry in the British Army in particular, if you didn't meet the standard, you'd be gone. Absolutely. And having been served as an RAPTCI in an infantry battalion before this test had come in, literally just before this test had come in, when it was still the old 8 miler we used to do, the AFT, if people didn't meet the standard, it was, pretty embarrassing. And commanders made a point of highlighting these people out and telling them, get a grip. You are an infantry soldier. This is your bread and butter. And before anything else, you're a soldier first. Whereas in the more technical corps and units, it's viewed upon a little bit differently. So yeah, I 100% agree. There's and to be fair, I don't think the RFT has raised our standards. I think it's given us a place where we're trying to make it specific for role. And the standards are pretty acceptable across the specific roles that require, the standard needed to hit them to do their jobs. I don't think it's unfair. I think it's certainly achievable. But naturally, there are, I use this analogy. I spent 95% of my time on the bottom 5% in my unit. It's the way it goes. And that's absolutely fine. It's part and parcel of the job when it comes to dealing with the PT domain. But then it's up to my experience, my exposure, my qualifications, and working in conjunction with other people to try and get them to that position to be able to pass.
I want to, maybe this is a bit of a rambling monologue to give some context to this next question, but it's something that we've touched on now a number of times with a number of guests at a number of different levels. And that is the role of fitness as a leadership development tool for NCOs. And there might be sort of a tangential conversation about embedded civilian subject matter experts, and maybe we get into a little bit of that, but I'm curious because, and if you've listened to some of the previous episodes, especially with the Sergeant Major, we asked this directly, where the biggest point of contention, I think, right now with the U.S. military and specifically the Army, when we look at putting strength and conditioning specialists into units to basically serve as kind of you guys' subject matter expert equivalent for physical training, they are up against this entrenched mindset of, oh, well, NCOs have to be in charge of PT because it's a leadership development tool. And they don't want that to be taken away from the NCO. And in a lot of cases, that NCO might not actually be trained in any way, shape, or form to deliver PT. It's just a hobby that they enjoy. And hey, fine, you plan the thing and we'll just call it a leadership development tool and away we go. And then the graduate level strength coach is just sitting there like, I'll just, twiddle my thumbs. So I say all that to get back to the original point, which is what role does PT play in that kind of quote unquote leadership development conversation for you guys?
I think for our deliverers, it gives them a massive exposure.
Mm-hmm.
For my junior NCO PTIs, I only have 2 that work with me. In my previous job, I had 6 military and 7 civil servant PT. So, it was a massive footprint that we had in my last job. And I should have double, if not triple, what I do in my current unit. But their opportunities in developing leadership is massive. What does it do in the field army? Outside of the phase 2 establishment that I currently sit in, I think it offers a lot of opportunity. So, what I want to see in individuals, and we might conduct particular PT sessions, and let's just say it's a log or stretcher race, it's but one idea and concept. We will theme that very much about, okay, this session is going to be about developing the junior NCOs and the private soldiers. So senior NCOs and officers, you're going to shut up for the next hour. You're not going to say a word. You're going to do as you're told. You're going to fall in line and listen to these individuals and follow their lead with regards to leadership. And they'll absolutely do that and embrace it. And sometimes we'll create leaderless tasks. And just so you come to the forefront, or we'll nominate and delegate. Right, you two, IC to IC, go. Dominate, get us from here to here. Show me your capacity, show me your capability. So PT is certainly a fundamental for that. And I think the massive thing for us is resilience. Testing resilience via the means of PT is huge and critical, because a lot of the soldiers we have coming through our door haven't had that exposure to any type of resilience, potentially. And we, similar to you guys across the pond, we recruit from Nepal, Fiji, countries in Africa, the Commonwealth aspect that we recruit from. There are so many diverse backgrounds and experiences that, developing that resilience is key and pertinent. And, we see the same trends in certain populations and demographics. So we know that's coming before it's even started. So we know through our experiences how to develop that, the areas of weaknesses, areas of strength. But I want to give them autonomy. If you want to develop yourself and become a leader, show me. Let me provide you the screen to show me what you have and the capacity to do it. Some will wilt away under the pressure, fight or flight, and some will go into that fight method and go, okay, and embrace it. And you see in the blink of an eye a snap of somebody change and go, hey, this kid, and I use that term, really, because I'm old, really politely, this kid has got something about them. Like, how great was that? What leadership they showed, given their exposure, 2 to 3 years in the service, and they told, they made command decisions, they embraced telling people and leading. So leadership as a tool for PT for us is absolutely huge, and it's something that we really do try and develop as well, and not just through the guys and girls out in it, that just experience PT, our PTI deliverers as well. I want you to show me something, deliver something on this. I want something different. Provide the autonomy. I want you to feel competent. And, we talk a lot about basic psychological needs of an individual. If I can ensure that I'm providing autonomy, competence, and they can feel related in the environment, then great. They're going to want to come to work every day. They're absolutely going to want to come and work in our environment, in our establishment. And I often pitch it to the phase 2 soldiers. Hey, look, I'm a salesman. I'm a PT salesman. We teach you things over a 6 to 8 to 12 week period that are mandated lessons, Monday to Friday, every week. That program is set and it's not budging. I want to sell it to you because I want you to come back in your own time. I want you to leave here after this experience and go, you know what, PT was quite fun. I actually learned a hell of a lot. I developed physically, mentally, with my, resilience, confidence, whatever it might be. And I want them back into the establishment at their own time and developing that. So that's kind of my pitch from an RAPTC perspective, and trying to flip the modality of do as you're told, right here, right now, do this, do that. Let me give you an opportunity to develop something. And I want you back, and I want you to take it further. I'll give you the autonomy. I don't want to be able to dictate to you as an instructor. I want to enable education via coaching and mentoring to get you back in and develop it further, because it's a culture shift. If somebody doesn't want to do something in the first year, at year 20, what's to say they're going to continue on that same pattern if I haven't sold it enough? It needs to be ingrained in them, and they have to have that self-determination to want to do it.
I mean, it sounds like, and granted, I'm kind of painting this with a broad brush, but it sounds like physical training for you guys is sort of embedded into the fabric of a lot of the development, a lot of the culture, a lot of the, like you just mentioned, sort of the leadership. And I think the American military would probably say the same thing, but then at the same time, on any given day, you walk around any given military installation, and it's generally a fight between the senior ranking NCOs to figure out which CrossFit WOD they're going to do, or, which deck of cards workout. Do you guys, I mean, just quickly out of curiosity, I mean, is that kind of what day-to-day PT looks like for you guys? Is it a much more coordinated kind of like, tradition-driven experience? I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. And again, listening to this on one of your prior podcasts about the way your PT is delivered, I found it almost incensed to think, is this really how it's conducted there? We are very much, and certainly in my establishment where we are, we work to a program that is a progressive PT program. It's periodized. There are periods where we deload and we prepare them for testing. So it's extremely structured and it's well structured. And currently we're working with the labeled it the Edge team, or there are a number of Edge teams working in the British Army that have, a lot of experts in their fields around sleep, nutrition, S&C, etc. And I'm working with one of them currently in my location. So I feel really fortunate to be able to do that, having just completed a master's in sports psych, and putting that information and my experience within a military context in my job to those guys with their backgrounds and experience as well. On day one, week one, you are tested.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a metric straight away to know where you're at. And that program, every day you come in, you know exactly what you're doing. There's no, we're going to make this up as we go and we're going to conduct this, because that's how accidents happen.
Oh my God. What? No.
we genuinely in the military, risk assessment processes are huge for us. And certainly in my field, if one of my instructors conducts something that wasn't part of the risk assessment or lesson plan, I'm asking them why, and I'm holding them to account immediately. And if they get away with it and something doesn't go wrong, cool. You didn't get burned, but tomorrow you might. And that getting burned might be a heat stress casualty, or might be a limb break. I mean, someone's going to have to be discharged. And I could tell you stories for days about things that people haven't, and you'll have your own exposure, obviously being military, as you're a military experiences yourself, about things that were a little bit rogue and shouldn't have been done and could have absolutely been controlled. And that's where my job sits. So, we are completely and utterly periodized by a program. And with Force, the RAPTC enforces that. It used to be a little bit, if I was into weight training, if I was a PT core guy in one unit, everyone would be getting massive.
Mm-hmm.
If I was a runner, everyone would be getting fit running.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've kind of caveated that and gone, look, we talk about the soldier athlete, and I know that's a term that's utilized quite a lot around a lot of military populations. So, define that, but that's another topic for another day. I think, trying to work on the components of fitness, developing them as best as we can. And that's why the Army physical training system that is utilized, this is our periodized programming that has been forced out and works differently for every unit. One cap doesn't fit all, and it enables us to do it safe. And rather than having a soldier that's just good at running or good at loaded marches and rubbish at mobility, flexibility, strength, power, etc., we've kind of reframed that, and there's a more holistic approach, and everybody's kind of good at everything. And if you've got an interest in marathon running, you'll be kind of good at everything, but really good at endurance-based, aerobic training, rather than old money, just really good at aerobic training because you're a runner, and rubbish at strength, rubbish at power, rubbish at anything else. So I think we're pitching it right, and we're certainly in a better place when it comes to structure than I think the experiences are in the US Army currently.
You mentioned the Edge team, and I was connected to you through Cameron from that team.
Yeah,
I'd just love to hear a little bit about because there's nothing, as far as I can tell, online yet publicly about like what the Edge team is and what they do. I'd love to hear a little bit about what that looks like
Top
and
secret,
how that's
Alex.
getting integrated.
They're top secret.
Top secret Edge. So Edge are, and it's quite funny, I was in our Army HQ, which is located down here in the south of England, with our PT Corps hierarchy a couple of weeks back with the Edge team. And it was very much along the lines of, what are you guys doing? It's pushed from the absolute top of the British Army, this Edge approach. And one of the teams has been sent with us at phase 2. I believe one is with a phase 1 basic training establishment. Another team are with a infantry unit. And we're just finding out various bits and bobs and research. And they've been working with us, collaboratively with Cameron and the team. And we've got a really good group of guys where I'm located. And we're bouncing off each other ideas all the time. And we're not just looking at PT, we're looking at nutrition, and one of the discussions with your Army Sergeant Major, getting them into our cookhouse, your equivalent, I can't remember the terminology, I jotted it down earlier on, eating correctly. What are the contracts like to enable them to eat the correct food? Are they getting the right amount of proteins, carbohydrates for what they're paying? And if they're not utilizing that, what's the alternative? Well, the alternative for us is a spa shop. And I don't know if you have the spa in the US, but like a 7-Eleven would be your equivalent. Okay, go in there and feed yourself. Well, I can get a hot dog and I can a Monster, and I can get a slice of pizza for £3 or £4. And that's what I have instead, because I didn't like anything on the hot plate in the cookhouse that night. So those are the type of battles and things that we're looking into. But from a PT perspective, we're already pushing some things, and particularly with the testing as well. Not that we're going to change testing, but we're certainly looking at it through a keen eye, because particularly with our SCR, I don't really feel it gives RAPTCIs and individuals something that is really accountable. If somebody doesn't meet the standard, and is an example of a med ball throw, what do I need to work on? Okay, the explosive power through pushing motion. Am I going to acquire that via a bench press up based elements or exercises to get them there? If I do, what's the so what of that? How do I hold them to account? If I do hold them to account, I can't manage that for 300 to 400 people if they all fail an element. It becomes very difficult. So we're looking at these type of things. And it's really exciting to work with them because they've got a vast knowledge of experience. And it's nice to put that, my lack of academic experience, having just walked out of an MSc, with my military knowledge to put to their exposure and experience and research and other stuff. And there's a few stokes in the fire, but I don't think anything will come out for 12 months. I'm not saying everything's sort of very low key, because it's certainly not. I just think when we get moving and gain some traction on some projects, I think more will come out. And it's making sure, of course, that it works for most of the demographic of the military population. It's not going to work for everybody. One size won't fit all, of course. But if we can hit a lot of parties, I think that would be a win for us.
I don't know if you know this yet from listening to our previous episodes, but you've definitely just triggered Drew, and I'll give him a chance to ask the question he wants to so badly in a second.
I'm dying inside right now.
Before he gets that opportunity, I just want to do a quick verification one, just so I understand it. Is Edge then, is it like civilian contracted subject matter experts? They're there kind of as advisors to RAPTCIs and commanders. And then what professions specifically would you expect to see in an Edge team?
So within our team, they are not advising. So they can advise the commander. They can, we basically bounce off of each other. In my space, if I didn't want any advice from the Edge team, they are all civilian, come from various backgrounds, and without naming names, we've got a guy in nutrition who has got an extensive background working in defense nutrition, across the MOD. Guys involved with strength and conditioning, sleep hygiene, psych, really qualified guys, and a great team. Now, if I didn't want to embrace what they're conducting or areas that we can improve within PT, the PT domain, I could potentially say, as I'm not interested. I think what I do here and the way we conduct our business is good and proper. I don't want to embrace any change. I'm quite defensive. I feel like you're potentially scrutinizing what I'm doing, and could be on the back foot slightly. They could go to the commander and say, look, the QMSI PT is thwarting us and not really enabling us to do our job. And I might get told to get back in my box. However, if I could justify reasons why, I would. However, we certainly don't have that relationship where I am. And I'm, if anything, more onto the team about projects and jobs that I feel could help us and help our soldiers, and throwing a lot of work at them. And they're very much, keep it coming, because they have the expertise to, come up with wins or areas to develop the research that I particularly don't have through the experience side. But, their academic experience, my military experience condensed to one really does help and push us in the right direction, I think.
I'm a little disappointed in myself for not having thought of this until you were just sort of talking about it. And if you've listened to any of our episodes, you will have known that one of our main side quests is to dismantle the American military's nutritional system, specifically AFES, which is, I don't even remember what the acronym stands for, Alex.
Army and Air Force Exchange Service. And it's not all of AFES. It's specifically that they empower fast food organizations to control the nutrition environment.
The hill I will die on here is that the military, there's fast food installations on every military base. And the justification we have heard from literally the top down is like, oh, well, soldiers have freedom of choice, blah, 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 blah. But I for me, at least, I cannot put that next to the obesity statistics, the PT failure statistics, and make it make sense. And so I'm curious for you guys. I like I said, I went to grad school overseas. I've been around the British military a little bit. I haven't spent a ton of time on British military installations, but what does the nutrition conversation look like? And if say Burger King wanted to infiltrate that, do you guys have the teeth to say no? Or does it become like, too bad, we're going to put Burger King on there because we're going to make a lot of money?
I don't think any fast food chain would want to jump into a military establishment. I don't think it would be fruitful enough, because I know our barracks compared to yours are quite considerably smaller. Although garrison wise, we have a couple of garrisons that probably house 10 to 20,000 soldiers, that probably would benefit. However, the contracts held by the military are very much delegated to civilian companies that aren't involved in fast food chains, and more bespoke on providing a service, and providing a good service. And the people that sit at the top of making these decisions are the majority former military, high-ranking officers that perhaps see a wider picture. However, the contracts might always be fit for purpose. So here's but one example. Old money, you used to have an X amount of money that would come out of your wage every month. And I don't know if this was the same for you. I'm talking 15, 20 years ago here. So say £100 a month will come out for food. And that you were 3 square meals every day, roof over your head, the normal stuff we associate. And the food was fantastic. You'd eat as much as you want. The options were great. We had military chefs. So, they were developing themselves and had a real quest for, you were living with them. So if the food was rubbish, you'd go back to your accommodation block late at night and go, that was awful. Like, come on, tomorrow's got to be better. So, that was a great, generally a great period. We then went to pay as you dine. So it got taken over by a civilian contractor. And the food opportunities were perhaps not as fruitful. And this will cause a little bit of a stir, I've no doubt, within the military population of the British Army, but most might agree with the fact that,
please stir away.
The quantity of good food provided for young adolescent growing soldiers in particular that utilize it more than the seniors like me who will eat in the messes, or at home, or bring your own food in because you're married, or etc. I just don't think, for value for money, it's great. It really is good. The food is really not really accessible. The cost is pretty low, but the quality at times can be not the greatest. And there are a couple of military forums that get hammered by the soldiers, and social media pages that get hammered. They'll take a picture of their meal, they'll put it on social media and go, is this what the army are feeding us? And sometimes those choices are not a fair reflection on what might be available that day. But in particular, I've gone down and the edge team I'm working with are the same. The healthy options are towards the back. The stuff at the front is the little bit more pricey: burger, chips, fish and chips, whatever it might be, lasagna, pasta-based stuff, which has its uses depending on what you've done and calorie deficits, what you've taken that day, PT, etc. But they're not always adhered to, and sometimes for the youngsters going through, we'll look at some of their meals and go, I don't fancy that. I just don't think is enough. If I had a chicken breast and a small portion of potatoes, and that's my meal, and that's what I'm allowed because that's what the contract says, and we're looking into these contracts, and they are very elusive, and that's not just coming from me, that's from the edge team and other members within our regiment that deal with the catering specifically. Show me what this contract looks like, because this food at times is not acceptable, could be better, and the contract is very much money orientated, because it's not it's not a military company that are dealing with it. They might be providing £1 million worth of food a day, but the contract might be they're making 2 million a day, and that's a real exaggeration, simplistic, I know, but the reason these contracts are in and given to civil servant organizations or civilian companies is because it's a profit margin, and without a profit margin they wouldn't be in business. So and I know that can be quite controversial what I'm saying, but the majority of people, particularly in my shoes and time of service, would probably agree with that. And it's difficult to see, because a lot of the kids on PT is but one example. First question is, everyone eaten this morning? Has everybody eaten today? Has everybody taken on sufficient hydration? And I get the classic, yeah, yes, we've done that, sir. Yeah, of course we have. Somebody goes down, got no energy. Why not? I didn't eat this morning in the cookhouse. Why not? Or I didn't want a full English breakfast and do PT. I didn't want porridge. I didn't want this, or whatever.
Full English breakfast is so good too.
It becomes it becomes quite challenging. And I'm not a huge fan of the contracts through my own experiences, but I'm not saying they're dreadful, but they could definitely be better, that's for sure, particularly the healthier options. But when you're 17 and you've got a metabolism where you burn things off, walking around, compared to being a little bit older and having to run around a lot more to burn it off, what would I have chosen? And I know I certainly probably would have not been as healthy all of the time. But we certainly don't have a massive issue with obese soldiers. From a physical training perspective, obesity isn't huge in the British Army. When we manage it really early via the BCM, where we body composite measurement people ensure that their waistline is in line with their weight, height, etc. And it's not just the BMI standard that doesn't always represent fairness, particularly with rugby players or squat power-based sports people. So I think we manage it to an extent pretty well, but certainly the food contracting is something that we continue to look at, and I don't think it's going to change for another decade. And again, it's all financially pushed.
Well, it sounds like we have some similar struggles on that one. We kind of indirectly answered the question I was about to ask because of it. So we'll leave nutrition off to the side as I ask this and talk about really like the physical component of it and the education of RAPTCIs and PTIs and things like that. I don't know, you might have a different perspective on this, but a lot of what we heard from you today sounds like things are nearly perfect for you guys, right? Like you have a nice long education pipeline. You've got a lot of things in place. There's a lot of adherence. A lot of it seems figured out. And maybe that's because your Army is smaller than ours and there's a lot of differences there, but we'd love to hear a little bit about kind of what the struggles and the downsides are that you guys are trying to work through as an organization and improve on, just so we don't feel so bad about how far behind we are.
No, I don't, we're certainly far from perfect. And, of course I'm going to look through things with rose-tinted glasses slightly because it's my organization and I'm passionate about it. But there are definite hindrances and issues that we have, and workforce is one. We've cut back from 120, 130,000 when I first joined. We're now down to nearly 75, 70,000 people. And the capacity to do more or do the same with less is the same. And I'm sure it's very similar in the US military. Infrastructure is a massive problem for us. Shared gymnasia is a massive issue. And here's but one example. I have 3 units that are in my building, and we are the custodian unit, so we get more or less priority because we have, phase 2 soldiers, recruits in essence. But I've got 3 units, 4 sub-units per unit. So that's 12 groups of people that want to do PT. And I think your mantra was 0630. And you were trying to find out where this had come from in the US Army, 6:30 every day PT, 08 to 09, every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday. Everybody wants the shop floor. And for 12 sub-units, I can't do it. So you've got to be flexible. And what that means is you can have it for this time. Somebody can have it from 9 till 10, somebody can have it from 10 till 11, but that disturbs our day. It's not my problem. You're going to have to deal with that. It's your chain of command's problem. You work it out. And then you come back to me because I manage his facility, et cetera, et cetera. So infrastructure is one. And physical training equipment was another one, but that's certainly on the up. We changed our modality from loaded march training, running, and very much resistance-based PT circuit stuff, which was arms, trunks, legs traditionally, press-ups, sit-ups, knees to chest, burpees, no equipment, limited strength, limited power. And now we've gone, full circle, and it's like walking into, we can, like your American football gyms, where it's just rack after rack after rack. And, particularly at our place, we're exactly the same. We've got one massive long wall that's got 12 racks back to back, all in the line, kit and equipment's prepared. And it can be used by anybody at any time. So we're certainly moving in the right direction with that, but it certainly still is a constraint, the infrastructure and the equipment we have to use. Testing is one. So one thing we're really looking at with the Edge team is the test for the SCR and the RFT. Now, as you've looked through and mentioned, it's where are the comparables? The SCR is components of fitness, but not all of them imitate the RFT, which is what we're holding people to account on when we want to test them and make sure they're fit for role and purpose. I think within our SCR, do I care how far someone can sit in for a med ball? I couldn't care less. How much do I care about somebody being able to sprint 100 meters in X amount of seconds? I'm not really that interested. What do I want to know? I want to know if somebody's strong enough to pull their own body weight and mount a wall or mount an obstacle via the heaves. That's what I want to know. Via the deadlift process, I want to know that they have, a range of movement and they're able to pick things up off the floor in a safe manner, using correct form, and they have some amount of lower body strength. Yep, I want to know that. And a 2K run. I want to know if they can shift their body at a particular pace and maintain it for that distance. Out of our SCR, most RAPTC instructors in my shoes would go, that's all I want to know. And if we can test people on those 3 elements, the rest of it is kind of long jump, broad jump, or yeah, great. Okay, it tests something as a component of fitness, but what am I going to do with that? What am I going to do with that information? So I think there's still a lot of work to do to marry up these 2 assessments with the SCR and RFT. The RFT is, again, really restricting in the equipment that we use and the amount of people we can take at any one time. With an AFT, the old 8-miler we used to do, I would have 200 people on parade with their Bergens. We've weighed them all. Off we go. And it might be me and 3 other PTIs that deliver that. But in 2 hours, I've tested 200 people. The RFT to deliver the whole thing from start to finish is about 3.5 to 4 hours. And it's time constraining. And because I've only got X amount of power bags, X amount of drag bags, etc., for the representative military tasks, I can only take a wave of about 15 or 20 at any one time. So, we now duplicate that into waves. I've got 10 waves now. It's taken me 6 to 7 hours to get the same amount of people through. So, there's real constraints to that, which doesn't help us. But given that at the minute we're riding the crest of the wave, and a lot of us feel, PTIs and RAPTCIs, we've gone through, Iraq and Afghanistan. We've now left, in the main, we've left those two areas, and we're now testing what we were doing there. What's the next? We don't know, and
we're fighting the last war.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So it's the classic. We still do a lot of military training from what we were doing in the Cold War. So digging in shell scrapes, etc. And of course, there's a place for that. And you only got to look at the war in Ukraine to see that there are a lot of shell scrapes and places being dug and tunnels everywhere that there's a requirement for that to be done. But from a fitness test element, what's the now? What's the here and now? And hopefully we don't fall behind with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Steve, we want to be respectful of your time, and obviously, given the time difference, it's much later there for you than it is for us. But 1, thank you for coming on. 2, thank you for being the unofficial spokesperson of the entire British military. We appreciate that. And then 3, next time we have you on here, both Alex and I will be in our physical training corps. I forget what you called them, but our tank tops, basically. So thanks again for coming on.
Look forward to seeing that show.
Hell yeah.
Let's do it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Guys, thank you very much. Appreciate it, and have a great evening.
Hey, Alex, let's cover our ass real quick.
Oh, great idea, Drew. All right, guys. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Before you go, please rate and review the pod on the listening platform of your choice. You can also visit us on our website at www.mopsinmos.com. That's mops, the letter N, mos.com. You can check out the library of podcast episodes, our latest blog entries, any helpful resources, and also sign up for our newsletter.
Drew nailed it. Just to underline a couple of things, the podcast entries have in-depth show notes on the website. So if you missed anything or you want to read any of the research we talk about, it is all there. You can, at the bottom of the website, sign up with your email and receive future updates from us. The blog posts go a little bit more in depth in kind of written form on a couple of topics we get questions about all the time. But most importantly, I just want to ask all you guys, our best way the word gets out is absolutely word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell the people you work with, anybody you think would find it useful. Thanks for spreading the word.
If you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot us an email at either Drew or Alex at mopsinmos.com.
Or there's a contact form on the website.
Thank you.